So inshallah now we'll be looking at our sarf component for the day, or the science of how words are made. We just had our lesson in Nahu, the science of how sentences are made, and now we're having our lesson in sarf, the science of how words are made. Most people when they study, they start with one science and do a short text in that, and then they go to the next science. So for example, I studied this book in sarf first, and then I studied the book in Nahu. But I think it's good for us to do both at the same time, since both of them are indispensable. We have to use both of them for our reading. And my kind of philosophy in studying the Arabic language is just a kind of diving in head first, really jumping into the language, reading and trying to understand the best we can. Also, these two sciences, they take different skill sets to master them. So an-Nahu, for example, the science of how sentences are formed, is a science where you're focusing on concepts and understanding, right? You're really learning how these different parts of the sentence work, and you look at different examples, and you, over time, build in your mind a familiarity with these concepts. But sarf, it's almost completely 100% just memorization. You just have to memorize patterns, and then when you come across these patterns, you recognize them. There's not a lot of deep thinking involved in it, just purely memorizing. So I think it's good if we do both of them at the same time. You have one lesson where you're thinking more conceptually, and another lesson so one lesson in grammar where you're thinking more conceptually, and then after that a lesson in sarf where you're just getting some new formulas to memorize in each lesson. So in the first lesson we memorized the conjugations for al-madi, al-ma'lum, up here, the past tense where it's known who is the one doing the action, and then also we did al-mudari, al-ma'lum, the present tense where it's known who's doing the action. And I gave you two patterns there at the beginning to memorize. I know that might have been a lot, but since those two patterns are so important, they're the ones that you're going to come across in almost every single sentence. We really had to have those in the beginning so that we could get started. Now for today, I'm just going to give you one pattern, and that is the pattern al-madi al-majhul, the past tense pattern for a fi'al, a verb, where we don't know who's the one that's doing the action. So for example, in English language, if I want to say somebody wrote a book, I would say he wrote a book. And then if I wanted to say the book was written, I have a different way of forming that sentence, right? I use that word was. In Arabic, what we do is we change the harakat on the fi'al, on the verb, to give that meaning. So to explain what I mean, fa'ala means he did. Fu'ila means it was done. So it's called al-majhul, that which is not known, because it was done but we don't know who's the one that did it. So al-madi al-ma'lum, the past tense where it's known who's the one that's doing the action, that's what we learned before. Now today we're learning al-madi al-majhul, the madi where we don't know who's the one that's doing the action. So that's how it works with the meaning. There's not a lot to explain here really. You just have to memorize this pattern. Memorize فُعِلَ, فُعِلَا, فُعِلُوا, فُعِلَت, فُعِلَتَا, فُعَلْنَا, فُعِلْتَ, فُعِلْتُمَا, فُعِلْتُمْ, فُعِلْتِ, فُعِلْتُمَا, فُعِلْتُنَّ, فُعِلْتُ, فُعِلْنَا. Memorize that and have it connected with those pronouns that we learned at the beginning, knowing which conjugation is for which pronouns, and knowing what that meaning of majhul is, of not knowing who the doer is. Al-madi al-majhul, the past tense where we don't know who the doer is. Fu'ila, it was done. So al-madi al-ma'lum, which we learned before, fa'ala is he did. But here now, fu'ila, it was done. And you can plug any, letters into this formula. Daraba means he hit. Daraba, he hit. Daraba, two people hit. Darabu, a group of people hit. That's for ma'lum. But here, what we're learning today, al-majhul, we would say instead of daraba, doriba. Doriba, he was hit. Doriba, two men were hit. Doribu, a group of men were hit. Doribat, she was hit. Doribata, two women were hit. Doribna, a group of women were hit. Doribta, you, male, were hit. Doribtuma, you, two men were hit. Doribtum, you, group of men were hit. Doribti, you, feminine, were hit. Doribtuma, you, two women were hit. Doribtunna, you, group of women were hit. Doribtu, I was hit. Doribna, we were hit. So memorize that, then move on to the next lesson. Memorize فُعِلَ فُعِلَا فُعِلُوا فُعِلَتْ فُعِلَتَا فُعِلْنَا فُعِلْتَ فُعِلْتُمَا فُعِلْتُمْ فُعِلْتِ فُعِلْتُمَا فُعِلْتُنَّ فُعِلْتُ فُعِلْنَا. And when I say memorize it, I really mean have it like that. Really, when I memorize these, I would just sit over and over and say it as fast as I could, trying not to look until I had it completely ingrained in my mind. فُعِلَ فُعِلَا فُعِلُوا فُعِلَتْ فُعِلَتَا فُعِلْنَا فُعِلْتَ فُعِلْتُمَا فُعِلْتُمْ فُعِلْتِ فُعِلْتُمَا فُعِلْتُنَّ فُعِلْتُ فُعِلْنَا فُعِلَ فُعِلَا فُعِلُوا فُعِلَتْ فُعِلَتَا فُعِلْنَا فُعِلْتَ فُعِلْتُمَا فُعِلْتُمْ فُعِلْتِ فُعِلْتُمَا فُعِلْتُنَّ فُعِلْتُ فُعِلْنَا فُعِلَ فُعِلَا فُعِلُوا فُعِلَتْ فُعِلَتَا فُعِلْنَا فُعِلْتَ فُعِلْتُمَا فُعِلْتُمْ فُعِلْتِ فُعِلْتُمَا فُعِلْتُنَّ فُعِلْتُ فُعِلْنَا. Memorize this so that you can say it over and over and over again, and then we'll move on to the next lesson, inshallah. And inshallah in the readings as well, we'll look at some examples of where this comes up when we come across them.